welcome to Brookline Hub In-Depth. I'm your host, Harvey Bravman. Very excited about today's show. I think it's going to be very informative for all of you at home. I'm joined by the team from the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations for the town of Brookline. And I have with me Dr. Lloyd Gellineau, who is the director of the department and the chief diversity officer for the town of Brookline. Caitlin Haynes, who is the assistant director of the department. Sarah Kaplan, who is both the ADA coordinator and a community relations specialist for the town. And Carolina San Miguel, who is the community engagement strategist for the department. I'm going to get right into it and start with you, Lloyd. Diversity, inclusion, community relations. What could go wrong, right? Give us a sort of an overview of what the department does.
The department, I sort of split into two types of functions. One regulatory, and then one more a community processing and event. More dealing with cultural competency and cultural relevancy, for Brookline. And so from a regulatory perspective, we address discrimination issues within the town. That could be a citizen versus business, citizens versus the town. And what we try to do is we try to either mediate or try to bring some kind of resolution to those issues that come up. Now, when I say that, we also focus on ADA non-compliance issues. We also focus on anything dealing with sexual discrimination or sexual orientation issues. We try to address those and again, try to help folks mediate those type of situations. And then you have the other side of that, which is, I think for me, where I think our focus should lie. And that's just bringing people together in a variety of different ways to have a better understanding of each other. And, because I think that's the core mission for us is help people understand each other. And that leads to better relationships and better partnerships with everyone in the town. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. I will add one more part to the regulatory component to that. Over the last couple of years, we've been charged with several different activities. That does test our bandwidth, but I think we're on a trajectory to actually accomplish these things. One of those things is the community engagement process. We are charged as an office to do the oversight and help and actually a consultative body to the town, capital T and small t, to meet the needs of the community that way. We're also charged with actually doing the oversight and participating in the racial equity audit that we're doing in town. And again, that's looking at policies and procedures that and activities that either mitigate positively or mitigate negatively, structural racism that exists within our borders. So that's my synopsis of it, and it's a very simplified way of looking at it. But I think those are the buckets that of the charges that exist within the office at this point.
In terms of oversight, is there a difference in the type of oversight for town of Brookline employees, for employees in the school system, DPW, all of the other different parts of government, the police department? And what's the difference between that and the oversight in the business community or an apartment building or something like that?
From a department perspective, there's not much difference, and mainly because the investigations that we do, we are not charged with the ability to provide sanctions. We can provide recommendations and avenues for folks to pursue, greater relief, maybe a legal means, maybe through mediation. So there's not much difference between the two in terms of what we're empowered to do to make the change. We, as a consultative body, works with the school systems, work with the police and fire department. When they come to us and ask us, even the school system, as simple as, let's say, a theater production. We've gotten into trouble, and other municipalities have gotten in trouble because they decide to do a play or musical that are, culturally insensitive and actually stereotypical and derogatory. And so we hope that people come to us to explore the possibilities of, like I said, mitigating factors that could either really enhance a performance if you're doing a theater, or cause a lot of issues, that unintended issues. So that's more where we stand. We are not shaking our hands and shaking our fingers and telling people what to do, but we let them know, if you choose to do these things, you have to make these are your considerations.
Caitlin, I'm going to go to you next. A lot of people might know that the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations has, since 2014, has had a big role in the Brookline Youth Awards. So we know that your department works with independent initiatives that you feel fit within, I guess, for lack of a better term, the mission statement of your department. And then there are also town committees and commissions. We've worked with the MLK committee a couple of times producing video, Fair Housing committee, and also there was a temporary committee, the Brookline Holocaust Memorial Committee. Tell us a little bit about how your department interacts with these committees and the roles that you play within the committees.
So as far as committees and commissions go, our office does provide administrative support as well as programmatic support to several different groups, the MLK Celebration Committee, the Indigenous Peoples Day Celebration Committee, the Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, Community Relations, Commission on Disability, as well as Commission for Women are the active committees and commissions that our office has right now. So as we act as staff liaisons to make sure that they have the resources and supports that they need in order to further any initiatives that they may be working on, as well as partner on larger initiatives that our office is also actively working towards. And then as far as outside organizations and community groups, as Lloyd mentioned, one of the most important things that our office does is build relationships and partnerships. So it's one of our highest priorities to be collaborating with organizations throughout the town of Brookline to either bring programming or further any kind of work that these organizations are doing, such as Women Thriving Inc., Brookline Hub. We have had partnerships with, I'm blanking now, but there are so many other organizations that we have worked with in the past and continue to collaborate and build relationships with.
Sarah Kaplan, my favorite person in your department, no offense, Lloyd, but
No.
Thank you, Harvey.
For all of you, for all of you at home, I got stricken with a condition called CIDP, which is the chronic version of Guillain-Barré syndrome. My body started to attack itself and destroy the sheaths that surround the nerves, and in my legs, my arms, almost all of my body. So I had very limited use of my hands for a few months and stuff, and reached out to Sarah, and acting as not as the ADA coordinator, but just as a friend, really helped me find the adaptive tools that I needed to get by in a time when I was in fragile condition, both physically and mentally. So just wanted to sort of bring that up, Sarah. So you split your roles between ADA coordinator and community relations specialist. Tell us a little about that, what you do for each role.
So 50% of my job is ADA coordination, whether that be addressing individual complaints about ADA access I get from residents, or working with departments to help them understand what ADA, ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, what the ADA means and how it affects departments and what they need to do to provide access, whether that be providing accessible communication or helping clear the public way. There accessibility is a wide variety. It's a big umbrella. So we try to make sure that the community is accessible to people of all abilities, and then I'm here to take complaints and then kind of work them through a system with other departments to address concerns. And then also every 3 years, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, every 3 years we do what the town does, what's called an ADA transition plan. So we sit down with each department, we inspect the physical location, we also talk about things like communication access, and what's called programmatic access. So making sure that programs and public meetings and are accessible and inclusive, and what that means. And then we provide assistance upon request. So if you need a reasonable accommodation, which is an accommodation for access related to a disability, you can request it through either the department or myself. And then, for example, if you needed an ASL interpreter, I would call the Mass Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and try to secure an ASL interpreter for an event or a public meeting. That's 50% of my role. And then the other 50% is this kind of nebulous term of community relations specialist, and that can be a lot of things. I like to say, if you have a complaint in Brookline, you're probably talking to me, so that I help people work through concerns, whether they have, I mean, I've gotten everything from complaints about the town website to housing questions or discrimination complaints, and then I kind of work them through the system and try to resolve those questions. And I seek assistance from everyone else in the department if I hit a wall or I don't know who to reach out to. And then I also do a lot of liaison work between our office and other departments, and kind of just I'm often like a community access point. So for example, one of the programs I'm working on right now with the Office of Emergency Management or Emergency Preparedness is something called the Tech Buddies program. And myself, and there were a couple other access points, we'll get calls from residents to ask if they qualify for the program, and then we can walk them through the qualifications and see whether or not a resident is entitled to like a free tablet and a year's worth of internet, for example. So I'm there to be assistance to individual residents and also to departments.
As ADA coordinator, are you also like an ADA compliance officer? In other words, if there's an apartment building that's, for instance, not ADA compliant in some way, are you the person that makes that determination, or are you brought into the situation?
So I'm not enforcement, but I do know who to contact about access issues. So I might work with building, for example, if we get a complaint about a particular apartment building. But then the question becomes things like, how old is the apartment building? When's the last time it was modified? Did the apartment building designers request a variance from AAB? Was ABZ Architectural Access Board, was that variance granted, because variances allow for less than perfect access with the ADA. So the question becomes like, can we address those individual concerns? Unfortunately, not every building in Brookline is accessible, and that is legal until you reach a certain threshold of like how much money you spend in modifying a building or building a building, for example.
Thank you. Carolina, the new addition to the DICR team. Tell us a little bit about what you do in terms of being a community engagement strategist. I know that the whole department is really excited to have you on board. Tell us what the experience has been like starting to work with the team during a pandemic, and how it's progressed, and what are the things that you're working on.
Thanks, Harvey. Yes, it's nice that you mentioned that I started in the middle of the pandemic when we weren't even allowed to come to the office. Obviously, that has been quite challenging, especially when you're working with communities. But I think, as Lloyd and Caitlin mentioned, like the core of our job is to build relationships. And now with Zoom and with technology, it doesn't prevent us from doing that. I have a lot of the work is that so there is a community engagement plan that has been designed by some folks from the community and our office. And so when I came in, that was done. I have it in my hands here. People can check it. It's online on the top of our page. And so my work is based on it to make sure we can implement it. So the main part of the job is to bring the departments together to work on community engagement. So it's not like us isolated or just the community. It's really activating everyone to be part of this process and be accountable for it, because there are different ways of engaging with the community, right? And also it's I do a lot of training. I've been doing actually now specifically trainings with department heads and identifying staff that is responsible for community engagement in each department. But it's also making sure that everybody participates in the process. So it's not just the community, it's the community and the government. And to make it happen is building relationships, pretty much, that's how it starts. So a lot of the work that I've been doing is really trying to get to know as many people as possible, strategic community leaders and people who have been doing projects here and there. And that takes time. It's a long process. Made it harder during COVID, obviously, but now I'm actually meeting some people in person finally, like that I've been talking to for months. It's a good experience to say. Today I actually met a couple of them, and it's nice to see them in person. So yeah, it's building these relationships, because our main goal is to bring people together. So we want to identify who does who. Maybe there is a person that did a project focused on women empowerment, and then there is another person who worked with that here or there in town. So you try to gather people together. And we're also listeners, so we are implementing some projects focused on that too. The idea is to try to hear what the community needs, what are the needs, and assess that, and then develop projects from that. We do some independent projects and programs and events as well. And I try to do some outreach. I've been trying to do some outreach work now in person, like pantries and some live concerts, whatever is happening in town. I try to go there and interact with people. So yeah, I think there's a lot in the work. It's I am somehow a representation of the community in town, but not the only one. it's something that I want to make clear to everyone, is that I'm not the only person responsible for community engagement. Like, this is a work that involves everyone. And if one piece of if the community is not in, or the government, like, it doesn't work if everybody is not participating in the process. And we want to get to the level that the community is sharing the leadership and organizing themselves. So we're working towards that. Yeah, I think that's it's a lot of collaboration. And the next step will be to work with the commissions, boards, and committees to do some trainings with them too, so that we can all understand each other better, communicate better, and hopefully, do more things and implement more things in the town.
Thank you.
Harvey, can I add one thing? Carolina's role is sort of really a tricky type of position, because I think a lot of people will view it as someone who should be an activist, rather than someone who comes into be informed and help people get their message out. So I know that that's something as a department we're trying to make sure that people are very clear about, is what the community engagement strategist does as opposed to what it doesn't do. And some people aren't going to be happy with that, but for that position to work, it has to come from, I'm not going to say a neutral perspective, but one that we're here to listen and do what we can to advance people's voices in the community. Essentially, we want to make sure all the voices need to be heard.
Your department, speaking to everyone, is, potentially charged department in terms of you're here. I'm assuming you're hearing people who are anxious, who are upset. You're dealing with, in the end, either something that's, in some situations where it's a home or a building or something that may or may not be ADA compliant. It could be because of a lack of knowledge. It also could be because the people that built the building knew that low-income people would be living there and wanted to save as much money as they could, whether or not they were creating safe conditions or not. So, and dealing with, lack of good faith hiring because of a potential racism now, or because of racism from 30 years ago. And, people, there are a lot of people in the town of Brookline, or it's perceived as such, that they work here and their parents work here and their grandparents worked here and their great parents worked here. So you all must deal with some disturbing situations or some volatile situations that you need to calm down so that town could come to some rational conclusion or help in some way. Keelan, what is that like? Am I describing it right, or is that just my perception of it?
I mean, I would definitely say, and Lloyd definitely does more, Lloyd and Sarah do more of the complaints than I have in the recent year or two. But I would say, yeah, there are definitely some complaints that are not easily mediated, but some are definitely easier to address and correct than others. And I think it's really important that our office do what we can to make sure that the complainant is getting kind of a fair ear to their complaint, and starting from a place of neutrality. for the person who's investigating the complaint. I think that there's also in the community a lot that is wanted from our office, and I think that is, I mean, that's very fair. Our office is able to bring an equity lens to a lot of the work that the town is doing. And I think that it's important that our office is held accountable to that, and that we continue to work on the mission that we have to make Brookline an inclusive place to live and work. And I don't know if that really answers your question, or if Lloyd, you have anything you want to add, but that's just how I feel about it.
You know, I think you said it quite nicely. We don't, but specifically for complaints, we typically don't get many complaints. When I'm speaking from sort of racial complaint or discriminatory complaints based on race. Those that do come up, typically, it's really interesting that folks will consult with me, would not want me to necessarily pursue anything, but they would go out and do the pursue it themselves. So a lot of times it's just about hearing someone out and advising them. There are some times where we have to, you know, we actually make recommendations and actually help them file a report with MCAD or HUD or DOJ. Those are very rare, maybe 1 or 2 a year. But most of them it's just people just coming and wanting to just to have an ear and have someone to listen to them. And they don't want to pursue it any further than that.
As the person that is usually the access point for most people as they come into the office for the first time, I think that a lot of our job is trying to be empathetic and not come in with our own kind of preconceived notions about, okay, well, this is how this should be resolved. I talk to residents all the time where I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Here are the options that you now have. I can speak to a department. I can help you file an MCAD complaint. I can do nothing. But this is and then trying to give it back to them with a sense of empowerment. Like, what would you like me to do? What is the next step that feels fair and equitable to you? And then I work in that way. And I think that's what our entire department is trying to do is take the community's lead in what they need and kind of be their liaison through a process. And Lloyd said it previously. He said, like, the best possible outcome for our office is to be redundant, we need to get to a point where we're not needed anymore.
And I can see that being your goal is to help create an environment where you're not needed, because your department was created to address a problem. And unlike the school system, for instance, that's just part of what a town needs to do is educate its young people. The fact that there is a diversity and inclusion department sort of means that there wasn't enough diversity and inclusion before the department began. Do you feel that the town with a capital T, the town government, listens to you or goes to you enough for your guidance and advice?
Well, I'll put it this way. It's gotten better over the years. And there's a variety of different reasons why that occurs. Our mission, though, and my mission is when we see an opportunity to, I'm going to say, enlighten or help a department, we take it and we move forward on it quickly. there are some times when we have to do a wait and see and a changing of the guard in some way. One of the key things, for example, one of the key things I work with HR about is making sure that diversity inclusion questions are on everyone's interview for any position, from the low rank positions all the way up to the high, because we want to have a culture of people who have an understanding of it. And HR has been effective in helping us move forward in that. And we're seeing change. We're seeing people use the language, and we're seeing people actually doing some outreach to us. And we're seeing departments actually coming in and checking in with us on certain things to make sure that they're covering, they're covering what they need to do. Now, I say that way, but that's not the end game, because what I'm telling you is they're coming for compliance, meaning we want to do what's necessary. We're looking to go beyond that. We want it to be the culture that, okay, in everything that we do, we want to make sure that we're looking at diversity and inclusion in its fullest spectrum in everything that we do, policies, buildings, you name it. And that's the end goal, like as Sarah just said. That way, when that happens, we're no longer needed.
I want to make sure that we get in two initiatives, and I'll go to you first, Lloyd, with the racial equity. I think it's called the Racial Equity Fund Grant or
Advancement Fund.
Advancement Fund.
Mhm.
And then before we get off, I really want to make sure that we talk about the business diversity business directory. But Lloyd, tell us a little about that fund.
All right. Well, as you know, when marijuana was legalized, in some
I remember that day. Yes.
right. And rightly so, there was a lot of concern about, here's a product or that was illegal, and a lot of people of color, in particular Latinos and Blacks, were imprisoned for something that's legal right now, and their lives pretty much destroyed for really minor offenses of just even possessing a small amount of marijuana. Well, some community members in Brookline thought that that was something that needed to be addressed, and there should be some kind of a restitution for that. So a couple of folks decided to write a warrant article, basically charging the town with using some of the funds that it gets to deal with sort of the issues that arose from unfair practices and imprisonment of people of color, in particular, like I said, Blacks and Latinos. So this fund was created and it's twofold. The first fold is business opportunities, making sure that folks have access to funds to create their own businesses, whether or not it's in the marijuana business or alternative, but also establishing programs that will enhance the lives of people of color living in Brookline. And so this fund was created. There's a grant process that actually was created by the community, vetted by the community in conjunction with our office. And that being said, it was supposed to be in our office. We would have administrated a grant process, but that has since changed. The grant will now be monitored and provided from Brookline Community Foundation. And I believe the launch of that program starting in September. I may be off with that, but I think it's September. And we do anticipate high levels of interest in doing that. I do have one concern that folks who are going to be seeking grants for businesses and stuff, that they may not have the tools ready to move forward with any kind of enterprise. And so I think one of the things I'm working with BCF on is actually how do we get people get people the expertise to actually come up with a business plan and actually be able to pitch it to BCF, or not BCF, or to anyone, banks and stuff like that, who are in all likelihood to be funding these projects. So it's still, we have the money, which is nice, but there's still a long way to go. One of the elegant things that I think BCF is going to do is that the folks who are going to be in charge of the oversight of this fund is going to be a diverse crowd. It's going to be a mix of town employees, obviously BCF staff, probably some business owners within the town of Brookline, but most importantly, it's also going to be having community members. So the question is making sure that the community members that sit on there, I believe there's going to be 6 members, are not the same old people, but again, folks who truly are going to be impacted by these funds. And I think BCF is taking some great strides to make sure that happens.
Caitlin, tell us a little about the business directory that you're helping put out, the diversity business directory.
Gladly. So our office and the Brookline Economic Development and Long-Term Planning Division have been working together for the last 2 years, trying to find ways to better support our diverse business enterprises in Brookline. And one of the kind of biggest hurdles that we had was identifying who our DBEs were in the community. There was no comprehensive list. Economic development and long-term planning has done storefront surveys, but there's been no demographic information. When businesses register, they get a permit in Brookline, they don't necessarily need to include that information. So we really didn't even know who to reach out to find out how the town of Brookline could be better supporting them. With COVID, things were even, obviously all businesses were looking for grants, and the economic division and long-term planning division were very, very involved with that. And finally, we were able to put into place a way to collect this information. So we actually have a summer intern in our office who is very interested in going out and canvassing all of the businesses in Brookline in our main commercial districts. It's something that she did previously, I believe, in Atlanta, and really was crucial in putting together our questionnaire. So our submission form for the directory is similar to Cambridge and Somerville, who also have diverse business directories. However, we've included not just the ownership question, which is, is your business 51% owned by a person of color, woman, LGBTQ community, a person with a disability, or veteran. We also have questions about accessibility, physical accessibility, as well as accommodations that businesses may have, such as delivery or curbside pickup, language access, what languages their employees, customer-facing employees speak, so that when people have this directory, because we're going to make it public for everybody, because we were also getting questions from the community. Do you have a list of Black businesses? Do you have a list of businesses that are physically accessible that I can go into without having to call ahead? And we didn't have anything like that. So this is something that the public has wanted, and something that we feel the town will be able to use to better understand the needs of our small business community as a whole. So that is something that we are putting together now. We will have the first version published in January of 2022, and we hope that it will continue to grow, and it will be something that we will update annually.
That's fantastic. We've always, I have a nonprofit and a for-profit, and I've always felt hesitant about telling people how diverse we were in terms of race, in terms of gender identity, and culturally, and just because I felt that by bragging about that, I was sort of going against the reason why I felt like we were the product of that, because we're a fair hiring nobody was hired because of their race or how they identify in any way. They were hired because I felt that they would get the job done. And so it's always really tough you almost feel that you're going against the whole the whole point of being fair by sort of bragging about it. Like, I wouldn't want anyone on our team to feel that they were hired because of, adding an African American would help our percentages. It was that because we thought they could do a kick-ass job, and that's why we brought them onto the team, period. Does that resonate at all, or I'm sort of spitballing, but
I like to use the term value added. When you have two folks who are similar in expertise and skill level, and let's say one happens to be a person of color, the other one not. My question to departments would be the value added beyond the scope, the skill level of the job. If you are making decisions as a body that's homogeneous, you're not getting the full spectrum of ideas and thoughts out there. And so I would go more towards the person of color in that, because that adds something more than something that we
Right.
didn't have. And I think that is the sort of framework that I would tell department heads to use. And the other thing is, it became a person who's quite aware in diversity and inclusion efforts, and that person happens to be white and has documented experience doing that. In my world, that person would probably get the job over someone who, a person of color who doesn't have that experience.
right.
And so I think you can't just look at it from a frame of color. You have to value added for our office. Okay, value added plus that knowledge of diversity and inclusion is going to get us to our end goal. It's complex. It's not something, every single position should be looked at in that role, and decisions made on that if we're going to make any lasting change in this. I also would add too is something we call critical mass. I think we're heading into HR territory, but I feel comfortable saying this here. It's less challenging to get people of color to work for the town of Brookline. It's more challenging to keep them here. And so we need to find ways of how to retain people a lot better than that we're doing. And we're taking strides towards that.
And that was a good answer, and that helped me out. Also, our nonprofit is all about diversity. So when I say kick ass, it would make sense that we would have a diverse team, since that's what, and the for-profit, my films are about that subject matter. I want to throw something out to all of you before I just sort of have final thoughts. And through 11 years of Brookline Youth Award interviews of young people and adults, two sort of common stories have come up. And one of them is about within the town of Brookline's government, and the other is in the commercial districts, commercial areas. And one is being pulled over by the police, or the police pulling over for young people of color and or adults of color. And the other is with the person who was being pulled over having done nothing wrong, and feeling that they were pulled over because they were a person of color. That was the reason for the encounter with the police. And the other is the notion of shopping while Black. being in a store and not feeling comfortable in the store because you're not the person feeling they aren't treated equally because either they had some physical limitation or because the color of their skin or the way they look. Students have talked about this a lot over the years, both instances. And so it is a common theme. And we've heard about police interactions from students all the way to Malcolm Cawthorn, who is a longtime teacher at the school and the Metco director, that he encountered that when he was young in Brookline. And he says that many of his students encounter the same things now that he encountered decades ago. Are these two situations things that you see in your department or you hear about, or?
I would hear about such things through some of the same people that you've talked to. And I do think most of the time those are more, I'm going to call historic references, which are equally as important. Because let's face it, as a person of color, you cannot make the decision why you're always going to probably default to history. I'm being stopped because of this. I did nothing wrong in this. And so when you see a police officer who stops you, that's going to be your automatic assumption. And I'm not, there's no right or wrong to that, but that's just how human behavior works. It just keeps being reinforced that way. Now, in terms of how to deal with that situation, I mean, the onus is on the police to sort of look at that and, do interventions to mitigate that, and which they do. How effective they are, that's still to be seen. But the problem is, the thing is, things are being done when these things happen. The other thing is, as a person of color, these things happen to you all the time. You wind up living your whole entire life dealing with these things. So, we talk about underreporting the incidents. Well, that's probably one of the factors. First of all, not knowing where to go. Number two, if I report, nothing's going to happen, or, and then third, it's, I can't live my life like this. I can't report every single incident that occurs. And so that's why we are underreporting. Stories, I can share with you one particular incident that happened to me that had a lasting impression on me about Brookline. If you remember Washington Street and I think Cypress, it's a liquor store now. It used to be a hardware store. I went in there when I first moved to Brookline to buy, some bolts and stuff, and I went up to the cash register, and this, the fellow who was there was, in front, very gregarious, very happy, chatting with everyone. It gets to me, he gets totally cold, and I go out to pull out my credit card, and it was American Express, and he just like, "Oh, we don't take this," and whipped it out of my hand, and I just looked at him. And he expected me to pick it up. And I said, "No, you're going to pick that up." He says, "It's your card." And I'm like, "No, you knocked it out. You pick it up." And he goes "You people." And he goes, "Walk." And that's my impression of Brookline. Now, that kid didn't know me, didn't need, I mean, how do I sort of register it? Was he having a bad day? It's for a person of color, you always have to judge, well, was that him acting racist to me, or was he just off that day? I have no way of gauging that, but at that point I did. When he said "you people," I knew exactly what it was.
Right.
And so it's never that clear cut in a lot of these situations, so you're always second guessing, maybe I'm overreacting.
You and I were walking to one of our Eat Too Much lunches, and a woman, a white woman, stopped right in front of you and turned and made sure her car was locked.
I remember that. I
And
laugh. I'm sorry.
And you told me that happens all the time. And I thought what you meant was I'm always forgetting things. I leave my car and I wonder if I've locked it or not. I actually wonder sometimes if I've left the door open or not. And and I but what you meant was making sure that the car was locked because there's a black person here.
So, but that is a typical day in the life of a person, you know, and going back to what we said about reporting and not reporting, I'm pretty much convinced that you can spend, this stuff can absorb your whole day, your whole entire life, if you go about and or have to be very, you know, report out on everything. And you don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. You want to think that people are going to treat you well and people are well intended. And, you know, it's challenging. It gets challenging.
We're coming to the end of a very quick hour. And tell me all if I've got this right. I mean, more than just an office where people can come file their complaints, which is, I think, what a lot of the perception of a lot of people in Brookline. You're trying to create or help facilitate a better world, right? Where people are more engaged, where people you're from a positive standpoint.
I think a better town government, a more inclusive and engaged town government, where, you know, residents of Brookline, all residents of Brookline feel that they can have a say civically about what our town does and how our town moves forward.
I'm going to be more provocative than that. I'm going to say that our government is a reflection of our town. And so if a town's saying that, you know, capital T town is racist, I would reflect that back. Well, no, Brookline needs to understand that the structures that exist in Brookline were created by the town people of Brookline. If you think this, you need to change the town. You need to change the town structure. You need to change the town policies. And there are mechanisms that we can do that. And we've been using them. I think things are getting better in Brookline, but still a long way to go. That's how I would frame it.
I just wanted to say one thing about DBEs and why it would be a good idea to join the diverse business directory, diverse and inclusive business directory, if you feel you should. The directory is not just to identify the person, minorities who own businesses. It is also there to help the customer figure out, is the business accessible? Is there anyone in the business that speaks my language? How will I be treated? What sort of assistance will I get when I'm there? You know, I've been working in Brookline for 3.5 years, and my second week of employment, Lloyd and Caitlin wanted to take me out to lunch to welcome me to the office, and we walked for 2 blocks to find an accessible restaurant. And it was really, really frustrating because everywhere we went, we realized I couldn't get in the door, or the door wasn't wide enough, or literally there were steps, and I didn't want to buy and like go back to the office and eat at our desks. I wanted to be able to experience the community, and it would have been very helpful for me if I would have been able to open a document and go, okay, these are the places that I can get in the door. Because I also don't want to spend money at businesses that aren't going to spend money to make sure I can get inside. I don't want to patronize businesses that don't want me there. And it doesn't feel like they're actively, you know, keeping me out, but it is a daily microaggression. I think that's what you were talking about, is like, being someone who isn't part of the majority all the time, constantly having to report microaggressions can get really exhausting.
Right.
So we only hear about aggressions that when they get to be so big and so pervasive that somebody says like, I have to do something, I don't know what else to do, so they call our office. And we're here to try and make sure that people are feeling heard and that their issues are addressed.
I want to thank all of you. Since our nonprofit has been involved, we're actually in 2014 when Lloyd, when you took over, Mel Kleckner asked if we could work with your department with the youth awards, and since then we've worked on so many projects with all of you. And it's always just been a very meaningful experience, and just the common humanity that you all have. And these are difficult world we live in, and there aren't too many opportunities to step inside someone else's shoes, to feel what they feel like. And Sarah, what you said just really, I could feel the anxiety of going from restaurant to restaurant, not being able to fit in. And you helped me so much when I get infusions every 3 weeks. So, but what it's like to be in a restaurant and you can't eat with the silverware that's there. Thank you all. Thank you all for the last year of your service during this pandemic, but even more than that, since you've all come and worked for the town of Brookline, you might have the most important department in the town right now. And thank you so much. And we'll see everyone with our next episode next week. Thank you.
Take care.
Hi, my name is Danielle Myers of ADW Video Productions and BrooklineHub.com. BrooklineHub.com is a 501c3 nonprofit online publication dedicated to community building through local reporting and events. Brookline Facing Civil Rights was produced by our founder, Harvey Bravman. The film is about the experiences of African Americans who helped break the wall of segregation that existed in Brookline before the civil rights laws were passed in the 1960s. Last year, the film sold out the Coolidge Corner Theater and included a panel discussion on inclusivity. You can stream the film and the discussion on BrooklineHub.com in exchange for a donation to the Brookline Community Foundation's Safety Net Fund. You can also stream Soul Witness, a film that features interviews with Brookline Holocaust survivors conducted 30 years ago, on soulwitness.org. For the last 11 years, Harvey has been interviewing outstanding teens as part of an event held at the Coolidge called the Brookline Youth Awards. The Brookline Youth Awards are an opportunity for Brookline residents to hear about the character, challenges, and dreams of its young people, as well as adults dedicated to their success through the power and intimacy of video interviews.